We were nervous that I was gonna get it or he was gonna get it. Spouses weren't allowed to come to the hospital. I was just terrified. This pregnancy wasn't gonna end with me having a baby.
Ready? Last push. Deep breath. Last push. You got the baby. Down here. And look. Here it comes.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Gandelman. I live in Jersey City, New Jersey with my husband and my baby Jake, who's 2 weeks old. I have an online boutique called Borough Boutique, and I'm gonna share my story about having my baby. So it's been quite a process, to say the least. After trying naturally to have a baby for about a year, I went to the gynecologist who referred me to RMA, which is a fertility specialist, to see why we weren't conceiving naturally. And after going and getting some tests done, I found that I had a low follicle count. So then we started our IVF journey. I did my first egg retrieval. We got 2 good embryos. We did a transfer. I got pregnant. And then a week later, I had a miscarriage. 8 days later, had another miscarriage. And then 9 days later, I had another miscarriage. It was really, really hard. And I just had to keep going and basically truck along and do another embryo transfer. So after doing, 3 egg retrievals and 4 transfers, I got pregnant with my baby Jake. I honestly was just waiting for another miscarriage to happen. And it didn't. People kept asking me, "Are you so excited?" And I really wasn't. I was just terrified. I was terrified that I was going to have another miscarriage, that this pregnancy wasn't gonna end with me having a baby. So literally until the moment that I held my baby in my hands, I wasn't excited. I wasn't anything except scared. So enter the coronavirus pandemic. When my husband and I first, learned of the coronavirus, we were pretty nervous because I was, very pregnant, and we were nervous that I was gonna get it or he was gonna get it. So for about 2 weeks before I gave birth, I had been pretty much quarantined in my apartment. As I got closer and closer to my due date, a lot of things were changing at the doctors that I went to. My husband was no longer allowed to come with me to my appointments. So my last sonogram I went to by myself. My last checkup before the baby came, I went to by myself. My original plan was to go full term, hopefully have my water break naturally. But with the state of the hospitals being what they were about 2 weeks ago, I decided I should probably get in and get out. At that point, they were already discharging moms and babies after 24 hours if they were both healthy, just so that you weren't spending a lot of time in the hospital and you didn't increase your chances of getting coronavirus. So at 39 weeks, I decided I was going to get induced. And about 4 days before the 27th, which was the date of my induction, we got an email from our doctor and from our hospital saying that spouses weren't allowed to come to the hospital. They weren't allowed to be there for labor, delivery, or postpartum, and I was gonna have to do this alone. I was sad. I was sad for my husband that he wasn't gonna be there for the birth of our son, and he was really sad that he wasn't gonna be able to be there for me. But in all honesty, as long as my baby was safe, that was all I kept thinking about. And of course, it saddened me that he couldn't be there, but it wasn't the end of the world. And I just tried to think about, at the end of this, I'm going to have my baby. So whatever it is, we just got to get through it. So the date came when it was time for me to go to the hospital, and my husband took me, dropped me off. We got there at like 1 a.m. He was okay. We had kind of, come to terms with what was going to happen. And I'd given him a whole list of things to do while I was in the hospital. I guess you could say a perk of him not being there with me was by the time I came back, the bassinet was built, the apartment was baby ready, let's say. But when my husband dropped me off, he pulled straight up right in front of the hospital. He just, said he loved me and that I could do this, and gave me a hug and a kiss, and that was it. I went into the hospital by myself. got there and they asked me if I had any symptoms. I didn't. So I didn't get tested for corona. They took me to my room where I stayed until I delivered the baby. I had to wear a mask the whole time, as did all of the doctors and the nurses. It was hard to wear the mask at first. It was hard to breathe. It was hard to drink water. It was hard to sleep. But I kind of got used to it the longer I wore it, I guess, with, as with anything else. While I was there, the nurses were taking amazing care of me. I had a button. Every time I pushed the button, someone would come in, see how I was doing, always in good spirits. And, their whole world had turned upside down also. But they were really there for me and just so supportive and wonderful. And if it wasn't for them, I really don't know what I would have done. Especially considering my husband wasn't there. So even though my husband wasn't physically there, I set up the computer with Zoom and put him on a little rolly table. So he was like a little, husband robot in the delivery room. So it was really comforting to have him there. I wasn't sure at first, how comforting could it really be for him to be there on video, but it really was. It was kind of like he was there. My original birth plan was to have my husband in the room and my mom and my sister and my sister-in-law, but obviously that didn't happen. I thought it would be, like a fun little party, but, Corona had other plans. So I had to settle for my robot of a husband. So they induced labor. After about 8 hours, after having the epidural, the doctor came in and told me I was, ready to push. So I was like, great, I'll just push out the baby, easy breezy, no problem. But I was very wrong. We started pushing. I pushed for about 2.5 hours. And then the doctor told me that we were gonna need a little help and she was gonna need to go in with clamps to help get out the baby. I guess this was a pretty big deal because the room was flooded with about 6 to 8 more doctors and nurses. So about 15 minutes after pushing some more, the doctor said, okay, one more push, and we got him out. So I pushed one more time and he came out.
Ready? Last push. Deep breath. Last push, you got the baby. Down here. And look, here it comes. Whatever it is, we have it. Oh. Oh yeah, like. Are we done?
And they put him on my chest. And told my husband that it was a boy.
Marty, it's a boy. Yeah. Definitely.
They had to take him from me so that the doctors could test his breathing for 5 minutes. It was a really long 5 minutes. I think I kind of blacked out. I was in shock. And then finally they gave him back to me and put him back on my chest and said, he's perfect, everything's good.
He's perfect.
And that's when I just lost it. This was, the moment that I've been thinking about for years, when I was gonna be holding my healthy child. And I just cried a lot. The nurse, brought Marty over to me on the laptop, and I cried, and he cried. And, he was really there with me in that moment, it was amazing. So then after, we video chatted our families and then some of our friends, and then the epidural started to wear off and I started to feel a lot of pain because they went in with clamps. They had to give me a bigger push of medicine towards the end. So I was very numb on the bottom. So I couldn't get out of bed for about 2 hours after I gave birth, and it was painful. I couldn't walk. So my baby was, in the little bassinet, but I couldn't even walk to go get him. I had to have a nurse bring him to me to hold, and it was really hard. In that moment, it would have been wonderful to have a husband, to help me, but I didn't, but it was okay. And then finally, after the 2 hours where we're done, they put me in a wheelchair and they were gonna wheel me to postpartum. You could tell that the hospital was very different than it usually is. All of the patients were only in their room, no walking around in the hallways. They tried to have you have as little contact as possible. So you had, your nurse that you were assigned to, and that's basically it. And at this point, they were corona testing every mom that had given birth and then splitting them up in postpartum on floors. So there was a floor for moms who tested positive and floor for moms who tested negative. So I was on the floor for people who tested negative. I had the biggest angel of a nurse. I really don't know what I would have done without her. I could barely walk, and I had this baby that I needed to take care of. So she helped me go to the bathroom. She prepared basically these diaper ice packs that they make for you in the hospital to, make you feel better down there. I had some tearing. It was hard to walk. It was hard to sleep. It was hard to pick up my baby. She was so wonderful and made my experience 10 times better. Once I got to postpartum, they said I didn't have to wear my mask the whole time if I didn't want to, but I kind of figured it's better safe than sorry. So I did wear it, even when I was sleeping, I wore it. I slept on and off throughout the night, and then finally it became the next day. We had to stay for 24 hours after I gave birth, and once 5 o'clock came around, we were gonna get picked up by my husband. And I just kept thinking of how excited I was for, my husband to meet his son. So 5 o'clock came, he was waiting outside for us, and he was just so happy and excited to meet our little guy. He was so happy to see me and hug me and know I was okay, and I really was okay. And then he just went straight into dad mode. He, took Jake from my arms, put him in the car seat like he had done it a million times before, and then we went home to Jersey City. So our plan was originally to go to my parents who live in Forest Hills with my sister so that, they could help us and we could all, enjoy the first few weeks together. But due to coronavirus, that changed. I was nervous that we got infected in the hospital and I wouldn't want to bring that back to my parents. So we decided we were just gonna, be our little family of 3 in Jersey City. We're really enjoying our time, and, we're still making great memories with our son. It's sad that, he hasn't met his grandparents, he hasn't met his aunts and uncles or his cousins or, any of our best friends, but, he's healthy and he's here, and we've been waiting for him for so long, and he really is just such a blessing and such a light in this time. And, the world is like literally falling apart around us, yet we guiltily feel so happy and so blessed that we, finally have this baby that we've been wishing for years. To any pregnant moms out there, this is still gonna be the best thing you've ever done. The day you have your baby is still gonna be the best day of your life. And, you kind of, as long as you don't lose sight of the happiness that this is going to bring you, you'll be okay. And yeah, and now we're so happy. And thank you for listening to my story.